Good evening. Welcome to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen meeting, regularly scheduled for Monday, August 10th, 2020. We welcome all those that are viewing this meeting. It is a cyber meeting, as we have gotten accustomed to here in the last few months. I would like to ask our city administrator, Patrick Lawton, to lead us in the invocation. Mr. Lawton.
Thank you, Mayor. Let us pray. Loving and gracious God, you are indeed the giver of all good gifts, and we thank you today for all your blessings for our community, for our city staff members, and for all the volunteers in the city of Germantown. We ask that you bless them abundantly, and we continue to seek your wisdom, guidance, courage, and strength. Be with us in our deliberations this evening and help us be wise in the decisions we make for the good of all those who have placed their trust and confidence in our leadership. Amen.
Thank you, Mr. Lawton, for the invocation this evening. In keeping with these cyber meetings, I will read into the public record our notice regarding electronic meetings here in the state of Tennessee. All local governing bodies in the state of Tennessee have been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. Germantown is no exception. In an effort to carry out its governance and operational responsibilities lawfully and effectively, while also considering the protection of public health, safety, and welfare, the Germantown City Administration has taken steps to conduct Board of Mayor and Aldermen and other public meetings electronically. These actions were taken in response to Governor Bill Lee's Executive Order number 51 and Order extending Executive Order number 16, previously extended by Executive Order number 34, which suspended the requirements of the Tennessee Open Meetings Act to the extent necessary to allow governing bodies subject to the act to meet and conduct essential business by electronic means. The Germantown Board of Mayor and Aldermen has determined that meeting electronically is necessary to protect the health, safety, and welfare of its citizens in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. Further, notice of such electronic meetings has been and will continue to be published in the same manner as is currently used for regular meetings. The public is also and will continue to be able to view the agenda and have live access to the actual meetings by electronic means by logging into Germantown's webpage and by clicking the appropriate link. Video recordings of the meeting will be made available as soon as practical after each meeting on the city's website at www.germantown-tn.gov. These measures are temporary and are due to expire on August 29th, 2020, unless further action is taken by Governor Lee. Thank you for allowing me to read that into the record. At this time, I'd like to ask our city clerk, Clerk Betty, could you call the roll to establish a quorum for this evening?
Alderman Sanders. Alderman Sanders.
I'm present.
Alderman Gibson.
Here.
Alderman Massey.
Here.
Alderman Owens.
I'm here.
And Vice Mayor Yonda.
Here.
Thank you, Clerk. All aldermen are present and accounted for. Takes us to item 4 on the agenda this evening, setting the agenda for the regularly scheduled meeting. The agenda was made available to the public earlier this week on Wednesday, was distributed to the public via our website and to other social media pages as well. Is there a motion to set the agenda as presented to the public?
Move to approve.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second, and Mayor, I would like to, I will be asking for us to pull the item number 7 from the preliminary to the regular agenda. And so to have that discussion now, or if appropriate at the later time.
It has been asked to amend the agenda by pulling item 7 from the preliminary agenda, or item 7, the preliminary agenda, which has one item, Sports Provider Agreement Extension, Germantown Football League. Without opposition, hearing no opposition, we'll move. Yes.
Mayor, what's the alderman's reason for wanting to move it to a regular agenda?
Because I would like to hear further presentation from staff, as well as I have an amendment that I will be presenting at that time.
Thank you, Board.
Okay.
Any objections? Hearing no objection, that item will be made as a part of the regular agenda. If you would make note, Clerk, that item 7, in which there's only one item on the preliminary agenda, will be now item 11 on the regular agenda. Hence, we will not have a preliminary agenda this evening. With that mentioned, it was properly motioned and seconded to set the agenda for this evening with that modification. Please call the roll, Clerk.
Alderman Sanders,
Yes.
Alderman Gibson,
Yes.
Alderman Massey, Alderman Massey, Alderman
Yes.
Owens,
Yes.
and Vice Mayor
Clerk, go ahead.
Yonda.
Yes.
Go ahead and call Alderman Massey again, please, Clerk.
Alderman Massey,
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries. The agenda has been adopted and set for this evening. That brings us to item 5 on the agenda this evening, approval of the minutes from the regularly scheduled meeting on July 27th, 2020. Those minutes were presented to the public earlier in the week when the agenda went out. Are there any modifications or changes, any errors in those minutes? Hearing no one speak, is there a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
Move to approve.
So motion by the Vice Mayor, second by Alderman Owens. Please call the roll.
Alderman Gibson,
Yes.
Alderman Massey, Alderman
I'll
Owens.
abstain. I'm sorry, can you hear me, Clerk?
Yes, thank you. You abstain.
Yeah, I was out of town for that meeting, so I'll abstain.
Alderman Owens,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Yonda,
Yes.
Alderman Sanders.
Yes.
Thank you, Clerk. The minutes are accepted and adopted and approved. That brings us to item 6 on the agenda, citizens to be heard. In our electronic format, citizens to be heard is opened when the packets are sent to the public sometime Wednesday of the prior Monday in the afternoon, and is open until noon on Monday. Just so the community is aware of this, I'd just like to make the statement, please, for future meetings, make sure that you follow all directions for completing citizens to be heard, which includes a complete submittal of name, address, phone number, contact information. The clerk at times has to be able to contact those members of the community to verify information. So just keep that in mind for future submittals to citizens to be heard. Clerk, can you give a overview of citizens to be heard for this meeting for the record this evening?
Yes, Mayor. There were 9 individuals that came forward for citizens to be heard in regard to the budget. An additional individual came forward with his support for our police department. And that is all, Mayor.
Thank you very much. And of course, those submittals were directly sent to each board member, mayor, and each board member as they were received and could be reviewed, read, and followed up on at that board member's discretion. That brings us to item 7 on the agenda, the preliminary agenda. As mentioned earlier, there are no contents to the preliminary agenda, and so that item will not be heard or brought forward. So that takes us to the regular agenda this evening. Item 8, Ordinance 2020-7. Yes. Yes. Who spoke forward, please? As mentioned, we're on item 8 on the agenda, the regular agenda, Ordinance 2020-7, rezoning of a single parcel from R3 to family residential to OG, Old Germantown. This is the first reading for this evening. Ms. Pounders, I believe, will be making that presentation, correct, Mr. Lawton?
That is correct, Mayor.
Ms. Pounders, you have the floor.
Thank you. I am going to open up a window for you so you can see my presentation. Can you see the presentation now?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Before you tonight is ordinance 2020-7. The purpose of this agenda item is to approve on first reading the rezoning of a single parcel of property from the R3 two-family residential district to the Old Germantown district. The property is located at 7708 Poplar Pike. This is a zoning map for the area. As you can see by the zoning map, the property is bounded by OG zoning on 3 sides, to the east and west and to the south of the property. Property to the north of this site is actually zone R3. Also adjacent to the north of the site is the Southern Railroad track and also Southern Avenue. This is a vicinity map of the property. As you can see, there is a single-family home located on the property. The single-family home was built in 1958. In 1990, there were some changes that were made in this area. And as you can see, to the south of the property and on both sides of the property, east and west, the property has commercial or office uses adjacent to this area. This is a survey of the property that shows the existing house, the existing driveways into the property. This house is proposing to remain on the property. In 1990, the Board of Mayor and Aldermen approved ordinance 1990-15 to rezone 17 parcels of property that bounded this site on 3 sides, from the R low density single family and R3 two-family residential district to the OG office district. Old Germantown district. As we researched this, there were originally 19 parcels to be rezoned. However, this parcel was under private ownership and also a parcel that was owned by the city of Germantown, because at that time, both parties decided to not participate in the rezoning at that time. Those properties were removed. So only the 17 properties adjacent to the site was actually rezoned. This parcel has remained R3 since 1990. The applicant proposes to use this property for office. The current R3 zoning does not allow the office use on this property. Therefore, he would have to convert this property to a zoning designation that would allow that use. And in this case, the OG district would allow the use of office. However, as part of that process, he will, if it's approved by the board tonight and on third reading, this property will have to be approved for a change of use from residential to office. The justifications for rezoning is based on 3 different criteria. Wherever the public necessity, convenience, general welfare of good zoning practice justifies the rezoning. Mistakes in the original zoning for the property or changes in the neighborhood. The court has determined what changes in the neighborhood justifies rezoning, and there are 4 criteria: changing in the population, changes in the existing road patterns or traffic, the need based on what is classified as the neighborhood, and then the effect of the zoning change on the adjoining or nearby property. As previously stated, properties surrounding this site are currently zoned OG. This proposed rezoning does comply with strategic objective number 2, which is economic development policies encourage investment in key commercial areas. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Pounders, for that presentation. Very thorough, very much appreciated. Is there a motion to approve ordinance 2020-7 on first reading and set public hearing for September 14th, 2020? Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
There's a motion by Alderman Owens. There's a second by Alderman Gibson. Alderman Owens, would you like to have the floor, sir?
Mayor, I really don't have a whole lot of comments about this. I think the previous owner just didn't want to get it rezoned at the time when the surrounding properties were rezoned. It makes sense to me. And so I really don't have any other comments than that.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Gibson, would you like the floor?
Just to make a comment, 30 years ago, when this was being rezoned to OG, those property owners, it wasn't just the rezoning. They had to bring those structures into compliance with current code to make sure it was ADA accessible. And so this rezoning makes sense to me today.
Thank you, Alderman Gibson. The floor is open for further discussion. Any further discussion on this particular item? Please call the roll.
Alderman Massey,
Yes.
Alderman Owens,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Yonda,
Yes.
Alderman Sanders,
Yes.
Alderman Gibson.
Yes.
Thank you. The item is approved and moves to public hearing, and which has already been set for September 14th of 2020. Brings us to item 9 on the agenda this evening. Ordinance number 2020-1, ordinance to adopt the FY 2021 budget, second reading and public hearing. Director Royals, you have the floor.
All right, thank you, everyone. As the mayor said, this is regarding ordinance number 2020-1. Purpose of the agenda item is to approve on second reading the FY20 budget and conduct the public hearing. The budget of total funds for FY20 will be $1,055,479,472, with the general fund totaling $57,103,123. Enterprise funds is $558,761, with special revenue funds totaling $70 million. Internal service funds of $2,093,703, and the capital improvement fund of $4,435,000. For the public hearing, the chairman for the FAC is present, and he will give a brief statement regarding the recommendations from the FAC.
Thank you, Director Royals.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Chairman McLaughlin, you have the floor. Go ahead, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I'm going to read a letter that was submitted to Mayor Palazzolo this morning. This is the 2020 report to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen by the City of Germantown Financial Advisory Commission on the FY21 proposed budget. This year's FAC had 24 members from across the community. The members represented a solid yet diverse group with significant combined experience in finance. Most of the members were in their second, third, or more years of service to the city. As a result, we had a good mix of new ideas and perspectives from a broad cross-section of our community. As in years past, many members were already familiar with the city's budgetary process and were able to compare this year's budget with those in prior years. The FAC continues to take great pride in the city's financial stability, ratings, prudence, and vision. The FAC's role is to provide advice upon and evaluate the financial soundness of the proposed FY21 budget and policies. The FAC met 5 times with outstanding attendance in all the meetings. The sessions were general fund, special revenue funds, including the GMSD budget, enterprise funds, capital improvement program, infrastructure replacement program, financial policies, and this year an update on COVID-19's effect on the city budget. These components were reviewed in the context of several factors: the city's immediate need for FY21, summaries of actual revenues and expenditures in prior years, and future needs and fund balance reserves sufficient to provide adequate resources to support defined service levels and provide financial resources that are consistent with city financial policies. At the introductory meeting, a review of the budget calendar was approved and a discussion was held on the role of the FAC. The second meeting was dedicated to a review of the city's enterprise funds for FY21, including the utility fund, Germantown Athletic Club, Great Hall, and solid waste. Generally accepted accounting principles, GAAP, requires local governments to use the enterprise fund type to account for business type activities similar to those found in the private sector. These business type activities include services primarily funded through user charges due to the effect of COVID-19 on the U.S. economy, as well as local municipalities. The third meeting was dedicated to presenting an update on COVID-19's impact on cities' budgets. The fourth meeting was a review of the special revenue funds, stormwater fund, a revised Germantown Athletic Club, and Great Hall based on COVID-19's effect on these enterprise funds, and a review of the capital improvements for all funds, as well as the financing plan to address the various capital needs of the city. The largest of the city's special revenue funds is the Germantown Municipal School District budget. However, this year's GMSD budget was presented at the fifth meeting to allow for adequate time and review. The superintendent presented the GMSD budget to the FAC, who in turn endorsed the school's budget. Also, the fifth and final meeting was dedicated to the general fund revenues and expenditures. The FAC endorsed the general fund with the same tax rate of $1.95 as in FY20. Discussions between FAC members and staff on all matters were open and professional. Any questions brought up by FAC members were either answered promptly at the commission meeting, or staff researched the questions and came back with answers at the following meeting. The FAC refers the board of mayor and aldermen to the minutes of these meetings for future details on all discussions. The FAC recognizes their role in the process of establishing a budget as an advisory group. With this said, the FAC approved the proposed FY21 budget presented as an advisory commission and passed this policy decision on to the board of mayor and aldermen. On behalf of the entire FAC, we'd like to thank Alderman Yonda for permitting the FAC to operate in a very open and frank manner. We want to state our confidence in the full staff with whom we dealt: Patrick Walton, Jason Heisman, Adrian Royals, Sherry Roll, and Takesha Fondon, whose financial acumen and mastery of this budget is of particular note. Also, the various staff within the city: Chief John Selberg, Jeff Beeman, Chief Richard Hall, Cameron Ross, Bo Mills, Joe Nunes, Phil Rogers, Steve Walensky, Pam Beasley, Reynold Douglas, Tony Fisher, Emily Rosar, Andy Sanders, and Nick Dahl, whose organizational skills were critical for the smooth conduct of our meetings. I think I can speak for the full commission in saying that we are very fortunate to have our city finances in the hands of such a capable staff. Finally, we appreciate the opportunity to serve the mayor and aldermen representing the citizens of our city in such an open environment. We encourage that every action of the board of mayor and aldermen continue to be addressed from the perspective of maintaining sound and substantial financial footing to preserve our quality of life within the spirit of the Germantown Forward 2030 goals and objectives. Thank you, guys.
Mr. Chairman, I would thank you on behalf of the administration, all the different staff members you mentioned, and on the for the residents and for our aldermen. I just want to thank you for your service in chairing this commission. All meetings of all of our commissions are very important. The FAC falls in line as being extremely critical for the well-being of the city. We appreciate your work. The 24 members, it's probably one of the commissions that has the best attendance of any commission in our city. I know this year was somewhat of a challenge for you and your colleagues as COVID affected all of us from the way we scheduled meetings. There was a pause, and then also we do appreciate the work the FAC did to make a recommendation that we don't jump at the first opportunity to pass a budget, that we actually take the time to look at, in a critical eye, look at potentially revenue changes. And so I think the wisdom of the FAC in endorsing the ability for us to have a continuing budget was very, very sound. And Chairman, I thank you for your service as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
At this time, I would like to go ahead and declare and open a public hearing. A public hearing has been declared for this reading of the budget. Again, due to having meetings in an electronic format, this public hearing had a dedicated email address. Clerk Betty, can you give us an overview of responses to the open meeting request for the FY21 budget?
Yes, Mayor, there were 6 citizens to come forward.
Thank you so much. All of those emails were submitted to the mayor and aldermen for their review and the ability to take that information, those suggestions and recommendations when doing our deliberations on this budget. Having heard the
Point of
public
order,
hearing-
Mayor.
Yes, I recognize you, Alderman Sanders. Yes.
Yes, I would ask, would it not be appropriate for the clerk to read the contents of those emails from those citizens, since it's a public hearing on the budget, so the public that's listening tonight would be able to hear what their fellow citizens had to say?
It's been brought forward in the form of a motion at this time. Now, that would be breaking in what we have done for.
Second.
Or there's been properly seconded. Thank you. There's a motion and a second. It would be breaking in our protocol and the way that we have brought forward either citizens to be heard or public hearing submittals.
Mayor.
I'm not sure. Yes, Clerk.
Excuse me, Mayor. All of the public hearing emails and all of the citizen to be heard emails are accessible for all of the public. They're in the same place that I put the Board of Mayor and Aldermen agendas on the website.
So those are currently available. Is that correct?
Yes,
Clerk
sir.
Betty? Okay,
That's correct.
Thank you. As chair, I will not recognize the motion nor the second. We will move forward with our meeting. Those submittals are freely available to all 40,000 people and to anyone in the world right now. We move forward with the business at hand. Is there a motion to approve on second reading ordinance 2020-1 and to proceed with third and final reading? Is there a motion?
Mayor, if I could interrupt, Ms. Wells has a brief presentation to make.
Okay, prior to, go ahead. You've already made one presentation. Is this another presentation, Director Royals?
Yes, it was a PowerPoint regarding the budget.
Go ahead. You have the floor.
Okay. Give me 1 second.
Well, Mayor, doesn't the fact that Ms. Rolls wants to do the presentation lend itself to?
You're not recognized, sir. Do you have a point of order or a point of inquiry?
Well, I think I should be allowed to speak. She's getting her stuff
Do you have
ready
a point
anyway.
of inquiry or a point of order, Alderman Massey?
The email should be read into the record.
You're not recognized, sir. Director Royals, you have the floor. Make your presentation, please.
Thank you, Mayor. All righty. So this is a similar presentation that I gave to the FAC meeting and also to the BMA work sessions. The general fund revenues for FY20 will be $57.3 million. This represents a 4.6 decrease from FY20 estimate and a 6.4 decrease from FY19. Three of the major drivers for this decrease in revenue are local option sales tax, room occupancy tax, and state sales tax. I do want to pay note to an additional $892,000 that is coming from the state of Tennessee from a grant that Tennessee is giving us. It initially had restrictions tied to it related specifically around capital outlay and projects. However, that restriction has since been lifted. Also, the filing deadline for the hall tax was moved to July. Normally that is in April, and we receive the revenue in June and July. So based on that same timeline, we expect to receive the FY20 revenues in October, and they will be recognized in the 21 budget. FY20 revenues and expenditures, I want to make a couple notes about the revenues. In particular, the local option sales tax came in at 100% of budget or at budget. That is of note because the economy was strong prior to COVID and we were ahead of budget most of the year until March. Also with the state sales tax, they came over at 4%. The spending under the expenditures for FY20 was halted when COVID began, except for public safety and needed maintenance, and vacant positions were frozen. I want to note, and I'll talk about later also, the State Street aid transfer was lowered in FY20 from $3 million to 1.25. That was where we were year to date when COVID started. One of the things that we did early on was to decide to try to assess the local economy and use that information to project the remainder of FY20 and prepare for FY21. So we did a survey sample of the 100 businesses that represent roughly 80% of the sales tax. And we kept that survey out to mid-May. One of the things that I really want to pay attention to and note of this is that the information that we received and got back was that most businesses were down more than 50%, except for the supermarkets and grocers, that you can see by this chart that they were ahead. In the aggregate, what we found out from the local businesses that provide sales tax is a 35% decrease. What is of note is that when we actually did get the information in, the data in representing revenues in June, which represented April, that we were only down 32%, or that we were within what we expected based on the survey results. So for FY21, we are budgeting $9 million. You can see that in FY20 that we had 11.7, and that is a 23.4% decrease. You can see in the chart in the bottom left-hand corner, the assumptions or model, if you will, that we use to project the sales tax, with 35% being our baseline, which represented shutdown in April. And so we have 3 months at 35% down, 3 months at 25% down, and then 16%, which represents what the recession was in FY20. In 2009. So this model allows for a couple of things, but in particular, it allows if there is a resurgence in COVID, then we have enough conservative revenues baked in so that we feel comfortable with the $9 million revenue. Also, the room occupancy tax, one of the things that we learned during the survey was that hotels were showing about 80% down. And we also saw that with the numbers that represented April from the hotel occupancy. We've since spoken to numerous hotel operators, and April represented 80% down, May represented 70% down, and June was 60%. And so you can see from here that we started the model with a 60% decrease and slowly built it back up over time. So the FY21 budget is $650,000 for the budget, which is a decrease of 25% from estimate and 40% from actual. But finally, the FY21 state shared sales tax is a little over $3 million. That represents what the decrease was during the 2009 recession. For the general fund expenditures, it is $57.1 million, which is a decrease of 1% from estimate and 5.6 decrease from 20 budget. Want to make particular note that the fire and police budget were preserved, core services and maintenance stayed intact. Discretionary spending was reduced and items that could be delayed. We do have the step increases in for fire and police, and we've made those retro back to July, and no merit increase for the general government employees. IRP. So when we started the budget back in January, we got 61 submittals representing $3 million. The beginning of March, we had 30 projects representing 1.5 million. And now after COVID, we have 11 projects that are a little over around 691,000. I'll go over those later. I also want to make note again that the state street aid transfer was reduced by 1.5 million. Prior to COVID, we had 2 million as the transfer, and then now in the FY20 budget, it is $500,000. I'll talk about it a little bit later, but in the state street aid expenditures, $500,000 for paving, $140,000 for asphalt rejuvenation, $375,000 for maintenance, and $200,000 for striping. It will be limited travel, meetings and travel. CEUs will be completed online, and a reduction, not a complete, but a reduction in police and fire travel. This represents if non-public safety operating lines were reduced by 4.2 million or 11% compared to FY20. So the general fund IRPs are a little over 690,000. You can see GPAC fire alarm replacements, the ECD, which is the Economic Development Buildings chiller replacement. Public Services is replacing a 450 pickup truck. There are 4 police fleet vehicles, IT network switches, radio system upgrades and replacements, police security cameras, and police in-car videos. So the city received 1.2 million through Shelby County for the CARES Act. There are 3 items that go along with this. It must be related to COVID. The expenses must be incurred between March 1st and December 30th of 2020, and the item could not be budgeted in your budget that was in place on March 27th. This money will be added to the budget with a separate agenda that will be brought to the BMA to recognize and accept the funds. The tax rate will stay in place at $1.95, and you can see that this sustains the budget that we have brought forward in FY21. For the enterprise funds, they include the stormwater, utility, solid waste, Germantown Athletic Club, and the Great Hall and Conference Center. So stormwater, the revenues for stormwater this year will be a little over $1 million, which represents a 0.1% increase over 20 estimate, and the operating expense is also a little over $1 million at a 6% increase over 20 estimate. There is one IRP project in this fund. It is the cured in place piping drainage for $50,000. Utility fund operating revenues will be $9.1 million. That's a 10% increase over 20 estimate. I do want to make note that the reimbursement from Memphis for the Kimbrough sewer is in this budget, is in those revenues. If you take that out, it's a 2% increase. Operating expenses is 8.4 and represents a 1% increase over estimate. So there's one CIP project in the utility fund. It's $235,000 for the North Johnson Road lift station. And then we have $988,000 for IRP with maintenance for the sewer collection, water main maintenance, maintenance for the well field, Hughes sewer inspection system, a ditch witch trench replacement, Johnson Road chlorine injection system, and a water plant flow meter replacement. Solid waste fund operating revenues are $4.9 million, which is a 1% increase over 20. And then the operating expenses represent $5.2 million. That's a 7% increase over estimate. I do want to make note that while we are drawing down fund balance, that is a planned drawdown. In the first few years of the contract, we have a surplus. And then in the latter parts of the contract, we then draw from fund balance. The athletic club. So the operating revenues for 21 for the athletic club are $4.5 million, a 20% increase over FY20 estimate, and the expenses will be $4.4 million, which is a 14% increase over 20 estimate. So of note that the club was closed for a time period back in the spring, and that is partly responsible for what appears to be a large increase over estimate. So there's one CIP project in this fund this year. It's $99,000 for the ADA ramp. I believe this came to the board recently, and this is an item that is being paid through insurance related to the architect. IRP projects are $517,200, which are weight room floor replacement, a pump refurbishment, a splash pad resurfacing, outdoor rec pool resurfacing, and the replacement of strength equipment, and then the fire alarm system replacements. The Great Hall and Conference Center has operating revenues that are $304,000, a 19% decrease over 20 estimate, and then the operating expense of $531,000, which is a 6% increase over estimate. They have one IRP project this year for $41,650 for the fire alarm replacement. For special revenue funds, I want to make note that these are funds that when the revenue is restricted for a specific purpose, we place them into a special revenue fund. The classic example is always State Street Aid, because the gasoline tax is restricted by law. You can see here, I only want to make a note of a couple items, but the State Street Aid, you can see is the revenues are less the expenditures. That is $368,000. And we are pulling that down this year. We've talked about the fact that we have lowered the transfer this year. However, the fund balance is still viable, and we feel that this is it's okay to have more expenditures than revenues in this fund. The other item I want to pull out is GMSD. This 61 million is our largest item in the special revenue fund. Their board actually approved their budget before it reached to the FAC and then to the BMA. The capital improvements fund this year is 18 items totaling $4.7 million. You can see the categories here, and we'll go through them. So general government has 2 items. These 2 items are ADA enhancements over at the community theater, totaling $120,000. Those items will be coming from reserves. Then under major roads, there are 4 items under major roads. You can see the milling and paving overlay at Neshoba and Wolf River Boulevard, the major roads plan, the Poplar Avenue culvert, and then the Forest Hill Irene widening. Everything is 80-20 money. In the case of the Poplar Avenue culverts, that's 100%, and then the Forest Hill Irene is 100% on the city, and that is reserves. Intersections, we have 4 items in intersections totaling $1.3 million. You can see the signal at Houston High School and Wolf River Boulevard, signal upgrades, an intersection safety audit at $200,000, and then the signalization at Wolf River Boulevard and Campbell Clinic. Let's see. Drainage project, we have lateral E bank stabilization, $200,000. I want to come back on this project when I get to the end of my presentation, but take note of this project. Parks and Recreation, we have the Greenway Trail extension to Collierville for $250,000. That is design. We have Lily Walk Linear Park design of $30,000, and then the Parkland acquisition of $50,000, totaling $330,000. The Athletic Club we just went over, that is the $99,000 for the ADA ramp. Municipal school projects, the Houston High School field house of $200,000, and then the Dogwood Elementary security entrance of $500,000. Utilities we saw just a moment ago, that's $235,000 for the lift station. And then the funding source, you can see here that from reserves, there will be $2.5 million representing 53%, and then the intergovernmental and grants is 2.2, which is 47%. And Mayor, that's my presentation. I would like to make a note on the lateral E. We have that in at $200,000. We would like to modify for third reading the budget ordinance and include the $875,000 that is part of the block grant. And so we will increase the revenues by $875,000 and the expenditure by $875,000. The bottom line won't change. What will be coming out of city reserves is still the $200,000. Mayor, we're available for any questions you might have.
Thank you, Director Royals. So you'll bring that forward in third and final reading. Is that accurate on your last item? Okay. I would just like, before accepting a motion, I would just like to say thank you to the local economy assessment team, consisting of Jason Heisman, Assistant City Administrator, Director Royals, Cameron Ross, Director of Economic Community Development, and Marie Lisco, Economic Development Manager. Close to a 20-page report, lots and lots of hours of work interviewing our merchants to, again, make sure that we were calculating revenue with more than just a guesstimate, but actual data collection. So thank you to that group, that team that did that outstanding work. At this time, I'd like to see if there is a motion to approve on second reading ordinance 2020-1 and to proceed with third and final reading. Is there a motion?
Move to approve. It's Rocky.
There is a, thank you, Vice Mayor. There is a motion by the Vice Mayor. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
There is a second by Alderman Owens. Vice Mayor Yonda, would you like to be recognized and have the floor?
Would this be a good time to ask for my amendment?
That will be fine. You can propose an amendment at this time if you wish.
I'm not sure how to necessarily word this because I would like to increase our paving. It's bothered me ever since my conversations with Mr. Mills, excuse me, and I'd like to figure out a way to increase it by 500,000, but only if we have excess funds. Say, for instance, we have some overage in sales tax that we can utilize. I don't want to take it away from anything else because we've pretty well got a tight budget here. So I guess I'm turning to you, Mr. Lawton, on how I would make that motion that we increase it to $500,000, which would take it, I believe that'd be in State Street aid, which would bring it to $1 million. And that extra $500,000 would only come, say, after a review in January or February, and seeing if we have, or even as far as late in March, to see if we have extra funds to be able to fund it. It's kind of a strange motion, I know, but I just don't feel like we have I think we're going to have a better year than we're projecting. And I believe we could have the extra money, and we took away so much from the paving last year. And I just think that we need to be doing more paving.
I can give this a shot, and let's see if this works for administration, for staff as well, and with Director Royals and Administrator Lawton. Your motion would be to increase paving by the amount of $500,000 contingent upon improvement in sales tax or other revenue. Would that be accurate?
That would be accurate. I just don't want to take it from somewhere else right now.
Got you. The staff, is that an acceptable form of a motion to be able to track that? Looking at Director Royals and Mr. Lawton.
I believe so, Mayor. And what we will do is, as we provide the sales tax reports to the board, you'll be able to see the increase. And before the next phase of the street paving contract goes out, we will give you an analysis of what's come in sales tax and whether or not we can cover the additional $500,000. So that way, Alderman Yondo, I believe this is what you want. If we don't receive it, we're not going to spend it.
Right.
Okay.
It's an area that we definitely need to keep going. We shut it down 75% over what we were projecting for FY20. And these roads need to be done. We need to have 10 miles a year to be able to replace them all in 20 years. So
there's a motion to increase paving by $500,000 contingent upon improved sales tax and other revenue. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second by Alderman Gibson. The motion, Vice Mayor, would you like the floor at this time on the amendment?
I just making it clear.
You have the floor. I recognize you.
Okay, thank you. We, as I mentioned earlier, we have the program is we're supposed to do 10 miles a year. So we replace them every 20 years because we have right at 200 miles. We continue to fall behind. We fell behind during the recession. we were starting to make headway, doing more and more, and asphalt's not getting any cheaper. So I'm just concerned that we're getting too far behind on paving. There's, of course, we became far behind in other areas too, but I hope that my colleagues will pass this because it is contingent on us doing better than we're projecting. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Alderman Gibson, would you like the floor at this time?
No, sir, I think Vice Mayor's expressed my thoughts as well.
Very well. The floor is open for discussion. Any discussion?
Yes, Mayor.
Yes, Alderman Sanders, you're recognized.
I do support the motion by Alderman or my colleague for the increase of this funding for state street aid and paving. After the first meeting, I have spoken with Director Mills. I too agree we need to be at least on a 10-mile per year program, and I'm told that takes current budget for them would be $2 to $2.5 million. So we're not even going to get half of that if we increase this to the $1 million mark. So it's a start. I think we ought to do more, look for places that we could increase the funding in that account.
Thank you, Alderman. Further discussion?
Sure, Mayor.
Alderman Massey, you're recognized.
I guess my question would be, if this is something that is needed and the administration felt like it was needed, why didn't the administration bring it forward to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen in a request from the administration?
That's what our aldermen are for. Thank you. Thank you for your work, Vice Mayor, and Alderman Gibson, Alderman Sanders, Alderman Massey, Alderman Owens.
Well, but you refer back consistently to staff, and staff, I think, wanted something changed earlier. So if we're supposed to rely on staff to tell us, what's needed in the city when it comes to things like roads and infrastructure, it just seems like it would have been appropriate for somebody in the mayor's administration to bring this forward. I mean, I don't know that Alderman Yonda necessarily had, or Alderman Sanders or Gibson or myself have the expertise to determine whether or not this is something that needs to be done. So I'm asking, where is staff on this, and why didn't they come forward with this request to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen?
Mr. Lawton, if you'd like to jump in.
Yeah, I just want to review the process of the budget and remind the board that the budget that's presented is the city administrator's budget. It's a proposed budget, and the board during this period of time, as you're all aware, during the 3 reading process, has the opportunity to make changes to this because, remember, it's an ordinance. It's not complete until 3rd and final reading. So things that the aldermen may want to bring forward regarding the budget, it's perfectly normal for them to do so. What I presented in terms of the city administrator's budget was my budget. That was my recommendation in terms of street paving, given where we are with our general fund revenues. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Lawton. You have the floor, Alderman Massey.
So perhaps the aldermen that are in favor of this, particularly Alderman Yonda, can explain why they feel like this amendment is necessary. And it's not because I'm against additional street paving. I just am curious with where we are as a city right now with the COVID problems that we've had and the anticipation of revenues being down at some point in the future, while we're wanting to have more government spending at this time. So if they would just expand on what they said earlier, I would appreciate it, and I'm sure the citizens would too.
Thank you, Alderman. Further discuss. Thank you, Alderman. Further, Alderman Yonda, we haven't gone through. I'm sorry, Vice Mayor Yonda, we haven't gone through everything. This is discussion, not debate or question and answer. The floor is open for further discussion. Any alderman like it to make any comments on this particular item? Vice Mayor Yonda, would you like a second time on the floor?
Yes, I would just like to say that typically, I suspect that with the 60 some odd projects that the not the FAC, but the finance, Ms. Royal's got probably added up to close to 40 or $50 million. And it's just that each department has to review what they can spend based within our expenditures and what we feel is revenue. The Financial Advisory Commission, for the 7 years that I've been involved in it, has an area that they constantly are wanting us to build on, and that is paving. And it's heartbreaking to get, over 2 million last year cut, or 2.5 cut to, I believe, 75%. And my colleague is correct. We probably need to do about 2.5 million a year. And that could be our goal, and has been our goal all along. Of course, it'll probably be 3 million in 2 years, but that's the reason it's an area that an awful lot of people are concerned with in the FAC. And I think, in talking with Mr. Mills, it's just it's a pittance at this point. But we may have other areas that are the same thing. But really, with all the way the budget's brought forward, with all these different projects that everybody wants, we just can't do them all. So it's unfortunate that we've had to cut back, but there's just so much money, and that's the reasoning. It's bothered me since we started this project, and I was hoping that I could find $500,000 somewhere to change, but that's not the case. If we end up having the extra money, it'd be nice to be able to utilize it. And as my other colleague said, if we end up having several $1 million, it'd be nice to jump it up even more.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I know you've always been a champion of road paving since your first day here on the board. Further discussion?
Sure, Mayor. I'll
yes, Alderman Massey, you're recognized, sir.
Since I've been on the board, I would agree that my colleague has been a proponent for additional road paving. I admire that about him. But we just heard a chairman of the Financial Advisory Commission go on about how thorough the meetings were and how much thought was put into it. And so I guess I am a little bit concerned that at this date we have an alderman bringing forward this proposal, but we didn't get the same recommendation from the administration. We didn't get the same recommendation from the Financial Advisory Commission. So if these are all things that were considered and discussed, you would think that either the administration or the Financial Advisory Commission or the two groups working in conjunction would have brought this forward as a recommendation to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. I don't know that any of us oppose more road paving, better roads. I mean, that's certainly something we all want to be for. But if our Financial Advisory Commission and the administration is who we rely on for guidance, then it just seems like we would have gotten that recommendation. I'm just a little bit troubled by the fact that we didn't, and we're just now, getting the recommendation from an alderman in tonight's budget meeting. So that's my concern. I'll probably vote in favor of this. My colleague has always been in favor of this. He makes good points. It is tied to other grants, and so I'll probably be in favor of it, but I'm still troubled by the way that it got brought forward.
Thank you, Alderman Massey. Further discussion? Please call the roll on the amendment.
Alderman Owens,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Yondo,
Yes.
Alderman Sanders,
Yes.
Alderman Gibson,
Yes.
Alderman Massey.
Yes.
The amendment carries. We move to consideration of the original motion. It's been brought forward and seconded. At the time the Vice Mayor brought it forward, it was seconded by Alderman Owens. Alderman Owens, did you like to have the floor and be recognized at this time?
Sure, Mayor. I do have just a few comments. I'll go ahead and, this is my 8th public hearing on the budget, and countless others as I was on the staff there at the city of Germantown. And so I always like to point out that, and I think it's been pointed out for me, that we are a process-driven city, and I appreciate that so much. The input and the guidance from our Financial Advisory Commission, as you pointed out, and as others have as well, these guys, these are volunteers who are experts in the field of finance, and they are willing to lend their time and their talents to provide recommendation and counsel to us. And while I've been through a number of budget hearings, I don't consider myself an expert in finance, and so I rely heavily on their guidance. I've done enough work as the former planning director, as a small business owner, and as an alderman to understand how these budgets work, and more importantly, I guess, how to adhere to them. And I believe the budget that we have before us, given the circumstances of where we are today, is a very good one. As we live through what is a historic time, and we wrestle with obstacles that we certainly couldn't have seen 6 months ago, we still managed to plan for the future. And I think it is a balance, a budget that has balance, not in terms of financial balance, but in terms of balancing the needs of our residents, all of our residents throughout the city. And so I appreciate that part of it. And I emphasize the balance part as well. Just a couple of things. I guess I'm sort of just copying what Director Royal said. I appreciate her presentation, but we limit the capital projects to those receiving significant state aid and or federal grant funding. There's no merit increases for our general government employees, but we also don't have any layoffs. I sat through the financial crisis back in 08 and 09 and was a part of the city at that time, and at least served on the planning commission at that time. And so we've been through it before, and we'll get through it again. We've just got to tighten our belts, and I think that's what this budget represents. Obviously, we're still able to keep our public safety and our first responders as our first priority with no cuts. We continue to fund education in our schools, a fact that's near and dear to my heart. Of course, my kids go to GMSD, and I know we provided multiple millions of dollars over since the GMSD was inception, and I'm proud of that fact. We continue to address our infrastructure needs, as well as including intersections, drainage, and we begin. What's important to me is we begin to address our parks master plan, and I recognize the importance of that. You all understand or are aware that I was the BMA liaison at the time when we went through the updating of the master plan. I spoke and looked in people's eyes as they gave us feedback on that, and I recognized or heard their pleas, the importance of the park system in terms of their quality of life and what it provided for them. And so I'm pleased to see, as we were forward thinking, looking down the road, that we will be providing for that. So I've got some more comments, Mayor, but that just wanted to kick off things by saying I think it is a very good budget, and I'll be supporting it.
Thank you, Alderman Owens. Further discussion?
I'll speak, Mayor, if you.
Yeah, you're Alderman Sanders. You're recognized, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. I too agree. It's a good, fairly good budget. There's a few things that I don't agree with that I've been researching and trying to come to terms with. I do see we have an increase in our police, fire, and ambulance, and our courts. That's understandable. Public safety is a priority in my book, and I do believe it is for the administration and our residents. So I believe they're happy about that. We have a few folks, we didn't read into the record the citizens to be heard, but from my quick review and count, there were most of the, if not all, the citizens' comments were concerning our parkland acquisition. 5 residents indicated their support, and I had 12 that indicated their displeasure with that. I too, last meeting, indicated my displeasure with the parkland acquisition due to its cost in future boards. I'm also disappointed that we didn't, that we're not going to fund the school's settlement agreement with the county any longer, and that's going to come out of the school board's money. And we had $5 million last year in our budget for Houston Middle addition. We never gave that money to the school board, and now it's my understanding we've advised the school board that we're only going to give them half of what we originally promised. So I'm hopeful that we will revisit that and look at that again. I would like to offer an amendment at this time to the budget, Mayor, and the amendment would be to remove the line item, parkland acquisition from the CIP budget. If there's a second, I'll be happy to discuss my reasoning for that.
There is a motion to remove parkland acquisition that's from the CIP. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Is there a second?
This is Alderman Massey, and I second.
Thank you, Alderman. It has been properly moved and seconded to remove parkland acquisition from the CIP budget. Alderman Sanders, would you like to have the floor on the amendment?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. During this time of uncertain revenues, I just don't believe we should be putting $10,000 in earnest money down on a piece of property and obligate future boards to figure out how to fund and support a potential $6 million project of a parkland acquisition and Longfield development. And we see in our master park plan that facility will never be revenue positive. We have an election year coming this year, and there's a potential for 3 new aldermen. And I would hope that if those aldermen aren't going to run for office, or they don't think they would be successful, to please not obligate the 2 remaining aldermen to fund this project in the future. There's a few key factors that led me to believe not only that we shouldn't obligate the $6 million, but some items in this property appraisal report that we received earlier this year. The subject property has been for sale for more than 20 years on page 2 of the appraisal report. Prolonged disruptions in financial markets may impact commercial real estate markets, page 4 of the report. COVID's unique and is expected to be temporary, but a reliable estimate on the impact of commercial real estate is not possible. That's on page 4 of this report. According to discussions with the city of Germantown, there will be a required detention basin plus an additional 5 acres of non-disturbance area. And it's estimated to cost at least $1 million for this detention basin. And that's on page 24 of the report. A review of the online data indicates that the subject property taxes were delinquent at the time they conducted that appraisal. That's page 41 of the report. The appraised value of the property is $3,310,000, but it has to be adjusted for the cost of the detention basin as discussed, which the city estimates between $1 and $2 million. They indicate they can do that for $1 million, so the value is reduced to $2,310,000. That's on page 55 of this appraisal report. So if the actual cost of the detention basin differs, it would alter the value conclusion by the appraiser. That's on page 56 of this report. And as stated at the first reading of this budget, a $6 million project is estimated, but we will still need a corporate partner to build the fields, install the lighting, concession stand, and restrooms. In addition, the Master Parks Plan indicates that the Longfield Complex will not be a revenue-generating facility, and in fact will cost the taxpayers approximately $330,000 to maintain this facility for each year. Colleagues, we just spent 3 years at a project at the Grove, we spent $7.5 million. Regardless of where the money went or came from, it was taxpayer money and a long project. Other projects that we needed has suffered for those few years. I agree. I believe that we should remove this item from the CIP and spend our next 2 or 3 years focusing on infrastructure, our existing parks, drainage, road paving, and items such as that. So I'm asking for your support to postpone or remove this item at this time. It could be brought back by administration at a later date in future years with possibly a new board in place that can sit down and work session with the administration and try to determine how we would proceed in the future and whether this particular amenity is appropriate at this time. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Alderman Sanders. The floor is open for further discussion.
Mayor would like just
Yes.
to make a comment, please.
You're recognized, Alderman Gibson.
Thank you. In this budget, we've got an option to purchase the parkland for this Longfield complex. And as Alderman Owens, as my colleague said earlier, when we looked across a table at our citizens and discussed what a comprehensive park master plan would look like, one in which this body approved in 2018, the $10,000 in earnest money, it simply keeps others from purchasing that parcel of land. One of our citizens in Citizens to be Heard mentioned or had one of my favorite quotes: God's not making any more land. And so to that effect, this does buy us a bit of time to see what the markets will be doing a year from now, to see what that investment looks like, just as any other of our big projects that have come before us. I think that the complex would be an invaluable addition, much like the 64,000 square feet of brick and mortar space at Riverdale. When we first began our school district, it eliminated 14 portables, our new television studio, the new turf field. All of those things were investments that made our schools go from good to better to best. And I believe that the parkland acquisition, again, having been a part of that process with many of you, in determining what the future needs for our city, not only what our current needs are for youth and competitive and recreational sports, but what it's going to look like in the future. And I believe that this is a wise investment for us to continue to look for ways to promote a healthy lifestyle and do it in a way that I think that we could be proud of.
Thank you, Alderman Gibson. Further discussion? Please call the roll on the amendment.
Could I respond as the second round then, Mayor?
That'll be fine. You're recognized, Alderman Sanders.
Thank you. To my colleague about allowing the $10,000 to be put down on the property and to keep someone else from purchasing. I noted in the appraisal report, it's been for sale for 20 years, over 20 years. No one has purchased that over this time. And it's my contention, just from reading the report, that probably because the property needs major drainage work done. The drainage work, if surrounding properties were to be developed, probably would need this same drainage work done. So I don't believe the taxpayers ought to invest $1 million or more in retention ponds that potentially would benefit future development. There's also in the appraisal report, the site characteristics say the gross land area is 44.06 acres. Usable land area is only 31.6 acres, leaving us only 70% of this land, if purchased, is usable. That's on page 22 of that report. why purchase a piece of property when immediately you lose the use of 30% of it? It just doesn't make sense. I don't believe it's a good use of the taxpayers' money, and I encourage my colleagues to support this amendment.
Thank you, Alderman Sanders. Any further discussion?
Sure, Mayor.
Sure, you're recognized, Alderman Massey.
Mayor, in 2016, there looks like there is an agreement that the administration entered into with the representatives of Forest Hill Heights. And I'd like to know if this current offer to purchase or idea to purchase this land in the general vicinity, or essentially the same vicinity as is represented in this letter from 2016, is actually tied back to the agreement that those landowners had with the administration.
I'm not sure what you're referring to, Alderman Massey. If you could
Well,
restate
sure
that, that would be great. I don't have the letter that you refer to.
Well, sure. It's a letter. The subject is Forest Hill Small Growth Plan, and it was from Sandy Bond. Cameron Ross was one of the recipients for the city, so I'm sure he remembered, but you would have been involved in it because you ultimately are the mayor, and I'm sure you have the staff meetings where this issue was discussed. I'm sure the city administrator will remember it, but the question is simple. It's this: is the current plan to purchase this land actually tied back to the agreement that the administration had with the landowners of Forest Hill Associates in 2016?
Mr. Lawton, do you have, I know that Mr. Ross is not on this call tonight. Do you have any recollection to the question asked?
No, Mayor, and you're right, being at a disadvantage and not seeing what the Alderman has. Who knows what he has in front of him? I can tell you the answer is no, and personally, I don't like the allegations. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. You have the floor, Alderman Massey.
So Mr. Lawton referred to an allegation, but I didn't make an allegation. So what allegation is he referring to?
You have the floor, sir. We're not going to go into Q&A with staff right now. Continue. And we have a third reading on this particular budget. If you'd like to submit the letter to myself and staff, we'll be glad to review it and use that time during third and final reading to be able to have some clarity to your questions.
Mayor, you and your staff already have a copy of the letter, and I'm sure you recall all this. So,
Alderman Massey, I'm part-time like you are. So the answer to that is no. I am not omnipresent, nor do I remember everything that goes on with everything. So if you'd like to submit that between now and third reading, feel free to. You have the floor, sir.
Well, Mayor, even if you are part-time, the city administrator makes more than the governor of Tennessee, and he is full-time. So
you have the floor, sir, and currently the topic at hand is an amendment to the budget on parkland acquisition. If you'd like to speak to that, you have time.
I oppose the parkland acquisition south of Winchester. It's unclear to me how the administration arrived at the decision to put parkland on the area south of Winchester if it's not tied back to the original agreement that you had with the landowners there in the plan to build apartments and essentially create a park in the middle of a bunch of apartments, both in Shelby County and in the city of Germantown. Seems unwise to me.
Thank you, Alderman. Further discussion on this particular item?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to step in now that
Vice Mayor Yonda, you have the floor, sir.
In 2016, the election was, the major product of the election was to improve our parks and rec. Hopefully all of y'all remember that. The parks plan, master plan came from that election, basically, where people were asking for us to improve our parks and rec and to expand them. The Parks Master Plan was a result of that, which we approved in 2018. I believe that there is very limited space around Germantown that wouldn't require the due diligence that we're going to do. Trying to find 35 acres or 40 acres, even the Germantown Country Club had a tremendous number of acres that were useless, and still does. The fact we need to start somewhere with this. It's a $70 million, 25-year project, or it was going to be 20, but we seem to be not investing in our parks at this point. If you are looking for revenue positive in every one of our departments, you would need to shut down virtually every one of them. This was brought up historically in the FAC meetings that we're not making any money at Parks and Rec, or we're not making any money at the Great Hall. And at one point, we weren't making any money at Germantown Athletic Club. We offer a service to our community, and it costs us money. The number of people that I talked to at the baseball fields, and Bob Haley this last weekend, and I realized those are parents who are there with their children, and I was there with my grandchildren. They were all positive on us moving forward to improve soccer, baseball. Some people talked about they were involved in rugby. This is obviously people younger than me. And more pickleball courts. And we're not going to get it by constantly putting it aside. I mean, for 2 years, we've basically invested nothing into our Parks Master Plan. This is $10,000 with the potential of another $40,000 in due diligence, which we need to do. If we end up having these areas that are for wastewater, et cetera, and there are people taking advantage of that are in the Germantown city limits, then we can charge them for that usage. The Grove, the money that the corporations gave was not taxpayer money. And the ones that the foundation gave, that was from their funds. I'm just shocked that this $10,000 investment, basically is what it is a problem. Yes, it's going to cost us more money, but it's part of what at one point was $70 million. I don't know what it is now. Parks Master Plan. With the $68 million that we spent the last 6 years, you think we might be able to spend $68 million in the next 6 years for our Parks and Rec that we spent for schools in the last 6 years. The schools are important. They would utilize these fields also. This is something that's great for the community. Parks and Rec is an extremely important asset to our community, and we need to move forward on doing something. This may not be the place to do it. That's why we're doing due diligence. But I believe that we need to move forward with this and give it a shot. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Yonda. And I would just offer one somewhat correction. That's I believe you meant stormwater, not wastewater. We don't need any phone calls or emails on.
That's right. Sorry.
Yes, that's all right. No problem. So further discussion? Alderman Owens, you were recognized, sir.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to offer my appreciation for all of my colleagues' previous comments. I think there's been some research that's been done and some good discussion here. It's my opinion. I stated this in my opening remarks. We just cannot continue to push our Parks Master Plan down the road. If we do so, this will not get done. And it was so important. If we wait on finding parkland, we will miss out on the availability of land. And while I recognize my colleagues' statements that it has been for sale for some time, we just don't have any idea. This could be gone tomorrow, and the size of land that we need for our Parks Master Plan is critical. Those pieces of land are not being made in Germantown anymore. As my other colleague stated, this is an option to purchase. We need to look at this because there are not many parcels of this size that we can acquire for this Parks Master Plan. And I firmly believe in this Parks Master Plan for the future of our city. We've got to plan for the future quality of life for our city. All of our parks, and some others may not know this, but all of the other parks, expansion of those parks, everything hinges on the acquisition of this property. It's not just one piece of property that we're purchasing for soccer fields. It's all of the expansion. It's the rugby, it's the pickleball, it's the soccer, the baseball, the football, all of these. This is the linchpin that we have to acquire for those others to set this Park Master Plan in motion. It's critical. The residents and stakeholders that I met with during our master planning process, I heard that desire for them and for their children to use these fields and to continue to provide new fields for soccer and lacrosse and the like. It's funny, there was a survey that we did, our consultants did, as we were going through the master planning process. 80% of the participants who were involved in that process said that they would be willing to incur a tax increase to fund the master planned expansion. And I think that speaks volumes. We're not proposing a tax increase, thank goodness, and I wouldn't begin to do so, but luckily we don't have to take that measure. We've got to look at the future of our parks and plan for it. And I just think it's critical, and those are my remarks, Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman Owens. Further discussion?
Thank you, Mayor.
Alderman
If I could,
Gibson, you're recognized. Go ahead.
a few moments. The need for, I actually, in receiving some of those letters for citizens to be heard and the public hearing as well, the concern about, do we need this space? And the statistics that I can say is that we have 3,000 youth that are participating in soccer and lacrosse. That's up from 2,600 in just 2 years ago. Soccer expects to outgrow the current facility within 3 years, with a growth rate that's consistently 10 to 12% per year for the past several years. And so with 450 of those rec players, 80% of those kids live in Germantown, 570 competitive, with up to 70% that live here in Germantown. Right now we have 4 regulation fields and 2 on the junior size. There is a need for more space, both with rugby, lacrosse now being a TSSAA sanctioned sport. And again, to see the need there and the response, I appreciate my colleagues' comments, and just as you said, I appreciate the discussion for each of us to be able to have as far as whether to support or not support this. But I do clearly support the acquisition of parkland.
Thank you, Alderman Gibson. Further discussion on the amendment? Please call the roll.
Alderman Owens,
No.
Vice Mayor Yonda,
No.
Alderman Sanders,
Yes.
Alderman Gibson,
No.
Alderman Massey.
Yes.
Thank you. The vote is concluded and the amendment does not move forward. We return to the main motion to approve on second reading ordinance 2020-1 and to proceed with third and final reading. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Alderman Yonda,
Yes.
Alderman Sanders,
No.
Alderman Gibson,
Yes.
Alderman Massey,
No.
Alderman Owens.
Yes.
The budget moves to third and final reading. Thank you for a very cordial and spirited conversation and discussion on this particular item. And we do, administration, Parks and Rec does appreciate support for a lot of what was said this evening. That takes us to item 10 on the agenda this evening, ordinance 20-3, real and personality property tax, second reading and public hearing. Director Royals, do you have this one as well?
I do.
You have the floor, ma'am.
Sorry, thank you. The purpose of this item is to adopt for the FY21 budget a property tax rate of $1.95 on second reading and conduct the public hearing. The recommended property tax of $1.95 per 100 of assessed value will generate approximately $34.1 million and represents 60% of the general fund revenues. Mayor, I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Director Royals, for that presentation. At this time, this is second reading and public hearing. At this time, I would declare and open a public hearing. The community had an opportunity to respond via email on Wednesday with a cutoff of noon today on board meeting day. Were there any dedicated respondents to this public hearing? Clerk Betty.
No, sir, there were not.
Thank you. That concludes the opportunity for the public hearing. And now we move to a motion. Is there a motion to adopt ordinance 2020-3, establishing the certified tax rate of $1.95 on second reading? Is there a motion?
So moved.
There's a motion by Alderman Yonda, and I think that was Alderman Sanders with a second. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you. Alderman Sanders with the second. Vice Mayor Yonda, would you like the floor at this time, sir?
No, I think we all agree that this is not a time to raise our taxes at this point.
Thank you. Alderman Sanders, would you like the floor at this time, sir?
No, thank you.
Any discussion? The floor is open for discussion.
Mayor,
Please.
guess
Yes, Alderman Massey, you're recognized, sir.
I agree with my colleague. This is not the time to raise the taxes, but I argued a few years ago when the city did raise taxes that wasn't the time either. That's still my position. I think the tax rate is too high. I think that the city uses the tax rate, the excessive tax rate, to spend too much. I personally think it's abusive to the taxpayers, and I think there is too much waste in the budget, and I just can't support the current tax rate. I think it's too high.
Thank you, Alderman Massey. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Alderman Yonda,
Yes.
Alderman Sanders,
Yes.
Alderman Gibson,
Yes.
Alderman Massey,
No.
Alderman Owens.
Yes.
Thank you, Clerk. The item moves to third and final reading on setting the property tax rate. That brings us to item 11 on the agenda, which was formerly the sole item on the preliminary agenda. That is Sports Provider Agreement Extension, Germantown Football League. Mr. Lawton, I believe you're going to handle that presentation. Is that correct,
I
sir?
will. Yes,
Thank
Mayor, I have a short presentation. This agenda item requests authorization to extend our sports provider agreement with the Germantown Football League, also known as GFL, for the second and final extension year option under the existing contract per the recommendation of the Parks and Recreation Commission. Park staff has completed the league's postseason evaluation for last season and determined that the Germantown Football League will continue to provide our community with quality athletic programs at a high level and professional standard. City staff recommends approval, Mayor.
Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Lawton. Let me get the item on the floor. Is there a motion to approve the final extension of the provider agreement with the Germantown Football League to be the youth cheer and football provider for the city of Germantown for the period of June 1st, 2020 through May 31st, 2021? Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
There is a motion by Alderman Gibson. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second by Alderman Owens. Alderman Gibson, you have the floor. Would you like the floor at this time?
Yes,
yes? Okay, go ahead.
It is. I'm trying to make sure that I had sent an email actually to each of you within the last 5-10 minutes, and I cannot tell if it's actually been received. So I have a red line formatted amendment that just simply it adds the following language. I'll be glad to read that. But before I do so, has anyone gotten this? I haven't received the.
I have it. Yes, I have it.
Okay. All right. Good. Okay. Good. Well, I just would. I will refer you to the first page, paragraph 1, and it's really the everything in red. The items that I've added include: provider further agrees to conduct all of its activities, including practices and competition, in strict compliance with permitted activities as set forth by the Tennessee Recovery Group, i.e. Tennessee Pledge, and any other forthcoming state guidance. Provider also agrees to adhere to the Shelby County Health Directive number 10 and any further directives which may be forthcoming from the Shelby County Health Department. And I offer that in the form of an amendment and can give further explanation.
Thank you, Alderman Gibson. You brought that forward in the form of a motion. Is there a second for the amendment of the original motion? Is there a second? Was that Alderman Owens?
No, it's right. Alderman Rupp.
I'm sorry. Okay. Vice Mayor, a second. And of course, Alderman Gibson, the first. Alderman Gibson, would you like the floor at this time on your amendment?
I would. Thank you, sir. There's been great discussion. I know that our city administrator and our Parks and Recreation Director, Beasley, we have been discussing this. I know Director Beasley has been talking with our friends with the Germantown Football League. They have been conditioning there on our fields and are eager, clearly, to return to competition play. And so we had been, I think the word precluded is accurate in saying that the language in the Tennessee Pledge did not allow for us to move forward. And I'm looking toward city administrator. I know that language was changed just, I believe, Friday or so, that gives us some leeway to make this change. And so I would ask for the support of my colleagues. I think that there are 2 to 4 pages worth of guidelines that are part of the very strict protocols that have to happen. GFL will be and has been in direct communication with Parks and Rec staff. They certainly understand what is needed to happen as far as not only coming to the field healthy, but to remain healthy throughout the season. Again, I ran this language through to our city attorney earlier today and welcome any questions.
Thank you, Alderman Gibson. Vice Mayor Yonda, you seconded the motion. Would you like the floor at this time?
No, just to say that I think this is a welcome amendment and needed. And thank you very much for your work from a colleague and Ms. Beasley.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. And I would just affirm that Alderman Gibson is the liaison to Parks and Rec. This, in essence, this wording enables football to be played this fall, so which is something that GFL and Parks and Rec are looking forward to. Further discussion on the amendment?
So, Mayor,
yes, I'll recognize Alderman Massey.
Why would football not be allowed to be played this fall without this amendment?
Would you, Pam Beasley or Mac McCarroll, or Attorney McCarroll, would you like to weigh in on that, please?
This is Mac McCarroll. Prior to the amendments on Friday, it was not going to be allowed. And what this amendment does essentially is, to the extent that Tennessee Pledge controls these youth leagues that are non-school sponsored, the state rules, which are voluminous, will control these sports. The schools that are the sports that are school sponsored are governed by the TSSAA. And to the extent that any future revision to county directives for health, we're currently on number 10, change and ostensibly try to affect these leagues, they're going to be responsible for knowing what those regs are too. The bottom line is they can read these changing guidelines as well as we can, and they change weekly, daily. And this puts on the Germantown Football League the responsibility to pay attention to who governs what they can and can't do. And until last Friday, they weren't going to be able to have these kindergarten and first grade type leagues because that's just what the rule was. The only thing that had been discussed was sports which are contemplated to be part of school activity. Even if they aren't school sponsored, they would be school teams.
Okay, so
Thank you, Mr. Carroll. Go ahead, Alderman Massey.
what is the specific rule that you're saying would have prohibited anyone in the Germantown Football League from playing football?
It was the Tennessee Economic Recovery Group, Tennessee Pledge rules as they existed as of last, I think, Patrick or Administrator Lawton, they were last Thursday.
That's correct, Mac, as of the, Attorney McCarroll, as of the 7th. Prior to that, you go to the health directive and it refers you to where to go for guidance, whether it's high school sports, you go to TSSAA, non-sponsored sports, health directive says go to Tennessee Pledge, which if you've seen it, it covers a number of different areas from business to industry to athletics and sports. Prior to last Thursday, the 7th, the language regarding contact sports says contact sports are not prohibited. Excuse me, are prohibited. I apologize. Are prohibited. The language today, or as of the 7th, and we saw it in the new guidelines today, allows for it, but under a list of guidance and rules and regulations, which GFL, with the execution of this agreement, will abide by.
Thank you, Mr. Lawton. Thank you, Mr. McCarroll. Alderman Massey, any further discussion?
Well, in the past, my colleagues have always objected to amendments being brought forward without them being provided to us in advance in writing. And I do not have those amendments that Alderman Gibson says that she sent us. Of course, if she sent it to the city email, I don't receive those emails because that account's restricted. So it's not in use. Regardless, though, I didn't receive it before the meeting. I'm not familiar with the information that the attorney is citing. I think perhaps he could provide us with some more information before we just blindly vote on these amendments. I'd like to know more. I want the kids to be able to play football, but I also don't want them to be unnecessarily restricted by this Tennessee Pledge if they don't have to be. I mean, I don't think they can play football running around in masks. And so if that's what this is about, then I don't want to do that. We don't have enough details right now to determine whether or not this is something that's actually going to allow our Germantown kids to be able to play football. This could just be an onerous rule that.
Yeah, 15 seconds, sir.
So I'd like to have more information before we take this vote.
Thank you. Further discussion?
Yes, Mayor.
Alderman Sanders, you're recognized.
I apologize. I didn't have my email. I don't usually have my email on during the meeting, so I was scrambling to log in and try to find this email from my colleague. So trying to multitask, I probably missed a lot of what she said, but what is the effect if this amendment is not agreed to? Does the Germantown Football League, aren't they still responsible to follow the Tennessee Pledge and the state county, I'm sorry, not the state, the Shelby County Health Department Directive 10 and any further directives? Isn't that incumbent upon them to do that anyway?
Mayor, you're muted.
I'm sorry. Attorney McCarroll, would you like to?
I'll be glad to. Certainly, arguably, any entity which is directly supervising that sort of activity, it would be incumbent on them. If the Shelby County or state authorities came to the scene of where the activity is going on and commented on spacing or shared water bottles or something like that, yes. But as the city council, I want it in writing. I want it clear that they are responsible. They have been made aware that they're responsible, that those guidelines are part of the contract and they're a material part of the contract, so that Parks and Rec is protected and the city is protected. It's dotting your I's and crossing your T's and putting your suspenders on with a belt on. That's really what it is.
Thank you, Attorney McCarroll. Further
Thank you.
discussion?
I appreciate that statement from our city attorney. I too want the city to be protected, and Parks and Rec and our board does. Just a quick overview of what Tennessee pledge rule. You said it's, I think someone said it's multiple pages, but does it go as far as require specific types of equipment? And as my colleague suggested, the players must wear a facial mask or anything of that nature?
Mr. Lawton, would you want to take a stab at that?
I will. No, Mayor, it does not. It does not, in terms of masking, it does not require that. The pledge talks about, as it relates to non-school sponsored sports, it addresses proper hygiene. It addresses distancing on the sidelines. It addresses contact with sporting equipment, cleaning those things off. Many of the things that, quite frankly, our Parks and Recreation Department has incorporated into many of the things that we are requiring of other sports providers as well. I would be happy, you can find it online, Alderman Sanders. If you go to Tennessee Pledge, there'll be a list of things that are covered. If you go to sports, you'll be able to see in detail what this is. It has to do more with protocol. How do we, to the best of our ability, keep our kids and our parents and our coaches safe and not in any type of harm's way as relates to the virus?
I appreciate that. And I appreciate that it's online, but we're getting ready to vote in just a couple of minutes, so I don't have time to read it. But is there anything as far as hygiene that you mentioned, or the other protocols that the provider would not be able to comply with due to the facilities that the city is letting them use? For instance, you mentioned hygiene. Is it possible that all the necessary hygiene requirements can be met with our current facilities, or is there going to have to be some kind of modification on our part, or some kind of provision made by the provider that he may have to bring in specific equipment or facilities to allow hand washing or anything of that nature?
Mr. Lawton?
Mayor, I would defer to Ms. Beasley on this, with the understanding that this might be coming to the board this evening. Pam did reach out to our provider, Germantown Football League, and had a conversation with them today. I believe, Pam, if you would like to try to address that.
Ms. Beasley?
Yes, sir, Mayor and members of the board. We've been working very closely, not just with our football league, but also with our baseball league and soccer. And we conduct on-site meetings with our sports provider to ensure that they have all the resources that they need to return to play safely. We were told that when the baseball league played this summer, they ordered a stockpile of PPE, disinfectant, and such, and they are working closely with the football league to allow them to utilize their surplus of supplies. I must say that all of our sports providers have been very detailed in making sure that all of the safety guidelines have been followed. And we have also involved our personnel in fire department and EMS to serve as technical advisors to these groups. So we feel very confident that they're doing all they can do to stay safe, and we're supporting them in that way.
Thank you, Director Beasley. And that concludes your time on the floor. Alderman Sanders, further discussion?
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to postpone this vote until the next meeting, please.
There is a motion to postpone this vote until the next meeting. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
It's a motion to postpone, and it is properly brought forward and properly seconded. Please call the roll. I tell you, before the clerk calls the roll, I would just like to quickly state that GFL and their leadership has taken their time in bringing forward their professional services agreement. So I would say that the delay of this tonight would probably hinder them from being able to start football. With that said, please call the roll.
Alderman Owens,
No.
Alderman Yonda,
No.
Alderman Sanders,
Yes.
Alderman Gibson,
No.
Alderman Massey.
Yes.
The motion to postpone fails. We return to the original motion that, we return to the amendment. Any further discussion on the amendment?
Yes, Mayor.
Alderman Gibson.
Thank you. This would be a direct question to our Parks and Rec Director, Beasley. And I think that it will help my colleague who had more questions about what those requirements were from Tennessee Pledge. Again, these conversations that have been with our sports provider have been a way to move forward for them, not to give them undue burden. And so, Mayor, at your direction for Director Beasley, just simply to respond what some of those protocols and guidelines were as far as what the GFL would be looking to implement.
Thank you. Director Beasley?
Yes, sir. So many of the guidelines are incorporated through the U.S. Football Association. Many of the youth sports organizations have national associations that provide guidelines. Certainly, baseball had those resources. Football, they have those resources. As Mr. Lawton explained, there are new guidelines that came out just a few days ago. And our football league is, they understand that things are fluid in this era of COVID-19, and they are willing and can make adjustments based on those guidelines that were presented. It is important for me to note this, that typically the football league, by this time of year, they are in full mode. They've already conducted registration and they're playing. Up until a couple of days ago, the information that we got said that contact sports such as football could only begin doing conditioning and skill building, not games. That position has been changed. But the football league, they provide all of their players with uniforms. They have to purchase equipment. So delaying a vote for another 2 weeks or so would put them well into September before they would be given a green light to go with their season. So just please keep that in mind.
Thank you, Director Beasley. Further discussion?
Sure, Mayor.
You have had the floor on two different occasions.
No,
Massey.
not for this, Mayor. I brought forward a motion. You didn't come back and recognize me.
You have been recognized twice on this particular amendment. There is still the ability to speak on the original motion when that comes forward. Further discussion? Please call the roll on the amendment.
Point of inquiry, Mayor.
Yes, Alderman Sanders, you are recognized.
I believe we already took a vote on the motion to postpone, so we're back to the original motion now. So I believe the Alderman is asking for a second round on the original motion.
We are on I will check with the clerk. Clerk, have we voted on the amendment, the language that Alderman Gibson brought forward? Have we voted on that yet? Yes, we have settled the item to postpone. That did not, that failed. Have we voted on the original amendment by Alderman Gibson?
No, sir, I don't believe so.
Okay, so that's where we are right now, Alderman Sanders. So thank you for your point of order.
Okay.
And
If I haven't had a second round, then I would.
You are recognized, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you. Since the provider would be required to follow these guidelines anyway, I do understand the city administrator's, the city attorney's position. It never hurts to have it in writing. Is there any cost due to this amendment? Is there any cost, additional cost to the city, or any thing that having them follow this amendment? Would there be any loss of revenue or additional cost to the city of Germantown?
Thank you for your question. I would defer to our Parks Director.
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. Alderman Sanders, you have the floor.
Thank you. With that information then, I believe since we're not going to postpone, I think I can support the amendment. I do wish we had a little more time to review it, but I think it's in order.
Certainly, thank you. Further discussion on this item, on the amendment?
Sure, Mayor.
Please call the roll.
No, Mayor, I said I would like to talk.
You're not recognized, sir. Please call the roll, clerk. You have
Mayor,
you've had the floor twice, sir. Go ahead, call the roll, clerk.
I haven't had the floor twice. Point of order, Mayor.
What is your point of order, sir?
I have not had the floor twice. We just went through this. Alderman Sanders explained it to you.
You have been recognized on the amendment on two different occasions, sir. Continue with the roll call.
Correct. That is not
Alderman
correct.
Gibson?
We just went through this.
Roll call has started. Alderman Gibson.
Yes.
Alderman Massey?
No.
Alderman Owens?
Yes.
Alderman Yonda?
Yes.
Alderman Sanders?
Yes.
Thank you, clerk. The amendment carries. Now we move to the original motion to approve the final extension of the, to approve the final extension of the provider agreement with the Germantown Football League to be the youth cheer and football provider for the city of Germantown for the period of June 1st, 2020 through May 31st, 2021. Alderman Gibson had brought that forward originally, and the second was provided by Alderman Owens. Alderman Owens, would you like the floor? Alderman Gibson already has. Would you like the floor at this time?
No, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. The floor is open for discussion.
Mayor,
please call. Yes, you're recognized, Alderman Sanders. I'm sorry, Alderman Massey.
This agenda item was originally included in the preliminary agenda, which would have not allowed any discussion, much less an amendment from one of my colleagues. It seems entirely inappropriate for the board to be asked to vote on an amendment, which we have not read, that pertains to some rule that was cited as justification for the amendment, which apparently we don't have a copy of, and some of us haven't read, quite frankly. And what I did read of the act pertains to non-contact sports, not contact sports. So I don't understand why my colleagues would think that we can even vote on this tonight under the circumstances at hand. We just don't have enough information to determine whether or not this is the right thing for the kids that play in the Germantown Football League. You know, and if this is a contractual issue, as the attorney stated, then I don't understand why he didn't simply revise the contract agreement in advance of this meeting, attach the pledge act, and then explain why the amendment was necessary. This sounds like it's a contractual issue that the attorney wants to advance to, I'm not exactly sure why he wants to advance the amendment, but clearly it's something that he's pushing, and I just don't understand why it was placed in the preliminary agenda and then amended, and then the board wasn't given a copy of the amendment in advance from some of the very same colleagues who are the loudest voices in opposition when any other amendment is brought forward and not provided to the board well in advance of the meeting. This is not something that we should vote on tonight. It may very well be a prudent amendment, but we don't have enough information to make that decision. And if the Germantown Football League feels like this is something that should be done, then perhaps we should hear from them. But for us to just blindly vote on an amendment that none of us have seen is not a responsible act. I mean, literally, we were at the beginning of the meeting, we were asked to extend the sport provider agreement for one additional year with the Germantown Football League. That's it. That's all that the administration was asking us to do. So if the administration felt like that there was some change that needed to be included in this, so we should have been notified about that in advance of the meeting, and we weren't. I just don't see how we can vote on this, whether it's whether it's a prudent step or not. I don't see how we can make that decision without more information.
You still have a couple of minutes, Alderman Massey. Further discussion on the item? Please call the roll.
Alderman Massey,
Abstain.
Alderman Owens,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Yonda,
Yes.
Alderman Sanders,
Abstain.
Alderman Gibson.
You are muted, Alderman Gibson.
Yes.
And I'm sorry, was that the conclusion of the roll call, clerk?
Yes, Mayor.
Thank you. And thank you for the support on that item. I know that the youngsters that play GFL football will be excited, and the coaches and the league as well. We have reached the conclusion of tonight's meeting, and we certainly do appreciate all of staff's participation and involvement, and also our board as well. And we are adjourned. Thank you.